Hey guys, welcome back to my channel. A while ago I mentioned the idea of doing a portfolio review, and lots of you commented and have continued to comment that you are really interested in that idea and that you specifically wanted to see kind of an overview or some of my older work, and for me to talk about like how things have developed and changed over time. So that's what we're going to do today. And since it's not really just specifically a portfolio review, I'm not like pulling out my current portfolio and going over it. It's kind of more of like an overview or a survey. I'm going to call it my art autobiography. And yeah, so there will be lots of old embarrassing artwork, and then me trying my best to talk objectively about myself and my process and style and stuff, which is always kind of a challenge, but I'm going to do my best with it. So if you are interested, then keep watching, because that is what this video is going to be about. But before I go into that, I do have to pause to say a quick but very big and very sincere thank you to everybody who has been watching and liking and commenting and subscribing. This channel just hit 5,000 subscribers a few days ago, which is just insane to me, because I feel like it was yesterday that I was sitting in this exact spot and feeling so awkward and terrified and making my first video. Yeah, so it's crazy to me that in just a few months that we're already up to 5,000 subscribers. So thank you very much. It is, yeah, it's really cool, and I appreciate it so much. Okay, so growing up, I certainly loved to draw, as most children do, and liked using crayons and markers and watercolors and all of that. But generally, I would say from childhood on through high school, my habit was I would get like an idea or a feeling of something that I wanted to draw, and then I'd try to execute it and spend like, 30 minutes, 40 minutes, an hour on it, and get really frustrated that I couldn't create on the canvas or the page what I was seeing in my head. And at that point, I tended to think about art as something that existed really kind of purely in the realm of talent, just like I don't know, I think I thought of it more like an innate quality, like being tall or having brown eyes, or these things that you really can't control. And so when I would get in these cycles of frustration and feeling like I couldn't do something, it really didn't even occur to me that I could like work hard at it and get better. So because of that, I never really thought about going to art school. Like as I was junior and senior in high school, I also loved to read, and so I was thinking more about like writing and English major, that sort of thing, because it just didn't even cross my mind that I would study art, because I didn't feel like I was talented enough to do it. So when I went into college, I went in as an English major, and I didn't even take a single art class until my first semester of my sophomore year. And even then, I just took a drawing class, just like a basic drawing class, drawing one. I took that as an elective, and it was just thinking like, oh, this will be a fun class. And yeah, so I signed up for it, but really had no idea what I was getting into or how much that was going to change my life. Yeah, so this was my very first art class. I had never taken an art class in high school. I had never had art lessons, and I had never worked so hard on any class before. None of my other classes in college, nothing in high school, obviously. But even as I was working, and I was working harder and harder with each successive project, it really felt totally natural, and it was crazy. I can kind of like remember this. Probably didn't happen in one moment, but it was like a series of moments a few weeks into the class, after I had passed this threshold of working like 3 hours, 4 hours, 5 hours on a single project, and saw, oh my gosh, like with time and practice, I am actually getting better at this. And something just shifted in my head, and yeah, and I had this sense that if I really applied myself, I could do what I wanted to with it, and that was an amazing feeling. Yeah, so I became more and more invested from that point on. And I would spend entire days and nights in the studio working 8 hours, 9 hours, 10 hours on projects. Well, probably not that long until later on in the major, but still, I would sit for hours at a time and would completely lose track of time. I would forget to eat or drink or go to the bathroom or have any light on except my little studio light. And I just would get so immersed in the project. And again, I had never had that feeling, never when I was writing a paper, never when Never when I was working on any kind of project before, just that total immersion and disconnect from everything else that wasn't the work. And that feeling combined with the knowledge that yes, I can like actually work hard on this and improve, even if I don't feel like I'm the most talented person out there, that made me think, okay, I have to do this, I have to change my major. So I kind of had to scramble and pull things together to pull together a little portfolio to apply to the major, because pretty late in the game, I mean, it was already the start of my sophomore year, and most people start as freshmen in art programs. So yeah, but thankfully I got it together and I got in, and I registered as a painting major, painting concentration rather. It was a fine arts major. And at that point, I still had no idea what I was doing in terms of like a trajectory for my life or for my career or the kind of art that I wanted to make. I didn't really think of myself as an artist. I just knew that I wanted more of that feeling of like being so invested in something that nothing else mattered. And yeah, and to me at the time that just meant like I needed to draw and paint as much as I could, as often as I could, like every minute of every day. So as I moved on in the major and I got to more of the upper level classes, I worked primarily in oil and sometimes in acrylics, but you know, it was mostly in oil. And I tended to paint with a lot of texture. I had a very textural hand, and I really gravitated towards kind of heavy applications of paint. So as you can see, I painted mostly people and sometimes objects, sometimes scenery, but really never food. It was never something I even approached in college. Towards the end of college, I became interested in more collaborative forms of art and kind of creating experiences that people could interact with and participate in. So I worked with other artists and sometimes non-artists and just other classmates or friends, people that I knew, to create a few different like large-scale fabric installations. This kind of work was really interesting to me because I was really idealistic, and I genuinely believed that art could change the world and that it should be accessible to regular people, not just to, you know, the art world, capitals. Continuing in that vein of being interested in collaborative artwork or art that encouraged participation, as my final project for college, I made a series of box construction sculptures. And these were cherry wood boxes that I designed and my dad built. And yeah, and I did different things inside with objects and mixed media. And I felt like they were kind of interactive because people could go up and like open and shut the doors and look at them from different angles and whatever. So then, less than a year after graduating, I ended up becoming very ill with what would later be diagnosed as an autoimmune disease. This is a long story in and of itself, so I'll keep it short for now and just say that during that time, I felt so profoundly disconnected from my body and from really anything physical in general, that making art, which prior to that had been a very physical act for me, I just felt like I couldn't do that anymore. I couldn't connect with it. It felt so foreign and alienating. So I went through, yeah, I kind of think of it as like my desert years, a really dry time where I just like wasn't making art at all. So then in late 2012, my younger sister Carly, who is also an artist and illustrator, and I've interviewed her before on this channel, so I will link her video somewhere on the screen, or maybe it will be on that side, but yes, that will be linked. And Carly gave me, I think it was for Christmas, gave me a set of watercolor pencils and a pad of paper. And at this point, I had just been diagnosed that year, earlier that year, and I was on my first year of treatment, so I was feeling better emotionally, not so hopeless, but I was still pretty sick, and I spent a lot of time on the couch or in bed, and I just really hated that feeling of being stuck there and not being able to do anything or participate in anything. So right there from the couch, I just kind of started painting anything I could think of. I didn't really think, for the first time in my life, I think, I didn't consider what it meant or whether it was serious or whether it was good. I just knew that I had to do something with my hands, so I just started painting. And to begin with, I started painting portraits, primarily just from memory, and it was people that I knew or had known, friends, family. And I wasn't planning on sharing any of these pieces with anybody. Initially, I was just doing them for myself, to do them, to make them, to have something to do. Yeah, and they were just kind of like a way to get my feet wet again without too much pressure. I was also intentionally not using reference photos, and as you can see, I was not really paying much attention at all to proportions or to color. It was just a way to keep things as simple as possible, which I felt like I really needed to do because I wanted to keep moving and not get stuck analyzing things, like whether it was good or not, or whether it was serious or not, or whatever. All of those things that had kind of caught me and held me back before, I just felt like I didn't even want to address them. So after a little while of doing this, I started using references again. And somewhere along the way there, I think it was probably in early 2013, I started drawing food for the first time. And I was pretty indiscriminate about what I wanted to draw. I would just like pick random food from the house, or, you know, like a jar of jam, or a peach that we had, just really whatever I saw that looked interesting. I mean, that was basically my only criteria, was did it look interesting and fun to draw? And if it did, then I was going to do it. So at that point, I still really tried to keep the connection to realism kind of at a minimal point. I didn't want to get too caught up in that still. So I tended to focus more on like the texture and the color and the overall just like emotional, the sense that I was creating, the feeling that I was creating in an image. So I wanted to keep things kind of light and happy and hopeful feeling, just because that was what I needed to feel at the time. Yeah, and at that point I also started sharing my work online, and I was trying to complete a new illustration every day. So I ended up working my way through most of the food in our house, and many of the objects as well. I was kind of interested in exploring that a little bit too. And then over time, I noticed that I was really gravitating towards these small details in the subjects, and I ended up kind of getting more and more realistic with my work. I never said to myself, well, now I want to really do realism, or now I want to try to make this look as realistic as possible. It just kind of, it felt like it happened. And then late 2013, so it's after like about a year of doing this every day, I feel like that's when you can really see my style kind of starting to change and starting to shift more towards realism, because there will be this like one painting that has like, that kind of has still the old vibe of those first ones that I did in 2012. And then right like the day after that, there'll be like a really super realistic piece. So then by mid-2014, I was pretty consistently producing work in this style that had higher levels of realism. And I was working kind of in that same color palette that still was like really bright and like happy feeling to me, at least anyway. But over time I found that I wanted to try out new textures and get a different look with things. So I started, during that year, I started really experimenting with adding in different kinds of media. So prior to that, I had been using almost exclusively watercolor pencils and colored pencils. But yeah, in 2014, I started adding in gouache and wax pastels and soft pastels and pen and ink and yeah, really kind of anything I could think of. So around that same time, I started to feel that kind of like old fear of stagnation and of getting stuck in this loop of like making art that wasn't meaningful or wasn't authentic or wasn't good or it wasn't serious. I don't even know what that means, but like I felt that really deeply. And I felt like I needed to keep making things that were challenging for me. So I ended up circling back to figures and figure painting. But I really wasn't sure at that time how I wanted them to look. So I experimented with lots of different things and like incorporating more backgrounds, different kinds of backgrounds, different approaches to the figure, and different combinations of media. But overall, even though like that part was so much in flux, I feel like my style, at least in regard to food illustration, was really very consistent at that point, all through 2014, and it continues to be the style that is associated with my commercial work today. So throughout 2015 then, I became increasingly interested in figures and kept on trying different approaches in figure drawing and painting. And I don't always show these pieces, and I never include them in my portfolio because to me they still feel like, to me I still feel like this aspect of my work is in flux and it's changing hugely from painting to painting. So yeah, I don't always feel like I want to share that because I have no idea where I'm going with it, and I frequently scrap paintings, or like I'll get 3/4 of the way through and then decide that like, oh, this isn't the direction I want, even though that's something I try really, I almost never do that when I'm doing other subjects, but for some reason when I'm doing the figure, or particularly if I'm trying to work in a background, I will reach kind of a point of frustration and just say like, oh, this isn't the direction I'm going, or this isn't the direction I want to go. I need to start over. Again, this is all while continuing to work and produce client work and private commissions that are still really consistent in this style that I've been doing for a few years now. So that brings us pretty much to today, as the artistic challenges that I'm tackling in 2016 are very similar to what I was working on in 2015. And I don't feel like I can objectively say, like, because of that, I don't feel like I can objectively say like, this is my style, I have arrived, and now I will always make work that looks like this. And I'm okay with that because I always want to keep growing, keep changing, well, keep growing and keep developing as an artist. So I really think about my style and the work that I make as a whole as a work in progress, and I hope it will always be a work in progress. So yeah, so that is my art autobiography to date. I hope you guys liked it. I hope you enjoyed seeing kind of this overview and of work over the years. I know that it's certainly been really interesting for me to look back and see how much things have changed and kind of where I've been, where I am right now, and to think of it all as a whole. So yeah, so if you did like this video, please do hit the thumbs up button and subscribe. And that is it for now. Thank you very much for watching. I know this was a long video, so if you've made it to the end here, yay, this is the end. Thank you for watching, and I will see you in the next video. Bye.